Hello, this is Daryl.
And Taylor.
And we've got a great US national team versus Jamaica preview show for you today.
That we do.
We also took a little NWSL and their new media deal, and we rename a bunch of MLS teams.
All of those things are true.
For better or worse.
For better or worse.
But first, we want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by SeatGeek.
Everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports fans and music fans as well. SeatGeek does all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring you get the best possible deal.
But when I open my SeatGeek app right now, there's only one thing I'm searching for, and that is the US men's national team.
That makes sense.
SeatGeek tells me that they are playing Jamaica in Chattanooga.
Oh, does it?
Friday.
SeatGeek is the one that told you that?
SeatGeek
Guy who
told
hosts a
me
soccer
that.
show? I'm worried about your research, Daryl.
Hey, well, it doesn't matter what my sources are as long as I get the information. US v Jamaica is Friday night, 7 p.m. in Chattanooga. On SeatGeek, the tickets right now are $37 to see the US versus Jamaica. Or
If only there were a way to get them cheaper.
or it could be $17.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because you can get a $20 rebate by using our promo code. To do so, to get that $20 rebate, download the SeatGeek app, go to the settings tab and click add a promo code, enter the promo code TSS.
That bit's important. Don't enter anyone else's promo code.
I believe that stands for Total Soccer Show?
It does.
Okay. SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first purchase.
So download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code TSS today. All right, on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Thursday Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove, and sitting across the table from me is a man who's going to be watching much more Lifetime TV than he expected in 2017. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hey, buddy. Well, since I watched zero Lifetime last year and thus far this year, yeah, I'd say I'll be watching a little
Are
bit
you
more.
sure? Did you not watch a little Project Runway here and there? Maybe even if your wife was watching it and you happened to walk in the room and be like, hey, this is interesting. What's
Is that
this?
Lifetime? I thought that was Bravo.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know these things because I have not watched that show in a very long time. I did watch it a long time ago. Not so much anymore.
Weirdly, Heidi Klum featured on TSS 2 days in a row.
Weird. Yes, she did. Yes, she has.
All right, so this is in reaction to the news that the NWSL, their new investor who's taken an equity stake in the league, is A+E Networks. Lifetime is one of those networks. One game a week will be featured on Lifetime.
Right.
And so NWSL and A+E have banded together to form NWSL Media.
Right.
This is a big move for the NWSL.
It is because while it might seem like not the most logical step because you're moving away from a traditional sports network to Lifetime, which is an entertainment network.
Yeah, so no longer on ESPN or Fox Sports or somewhere you would expect to find soccer.
Yeah. The reality is, from what I saw from the head of an A&E, is that they're essentially trying to get away from the idea of Lifetime as like a TV brand and turning it into more of like a female media brand, is I believe the terminology she used. And so with that
less
comes
after-school special.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that said, they have inked a 3-movie deal with Ronda Rousey, so who knows? But the point I'm getting at is that I think like Fox and ESPN probably are never going to dedicate the time and attention that Lifetime will.
Yes.
So, for example, they've already announced that there's going to be a 30-minute pregame show before every one of those games, which I think is
maybe Fox or ESPN would not have done that. They'd have just been like, just settle for being on.
It would have it probably would have cut from whatever was on right to kickoff. Then you get the halftime show, and then it would go back to the game, and that'd be it. So I think like Lifetime is probably going to dedicate more coverage to it. It's going to be more visibility because it's going to be like on the jerseys themselves. You're going to see the Lifetime branding.
Yeah, no, I don't think across the front like the big sponsor because you still want teams to go and get their own sponsors. I think like a sleeve patch essentially.
Right, and I think the other thing that's really important in this is that, as you mentioned, it's going to be this kind of new media entity, and with that,
NWSL Media.
Yeah, and from what I read, that is going to include like they're going to be responsible for sponsorships. And one thing that we talked about previously with like some of the problems NWSL is facing is that they haven't done a good job of finding successful sponsorships and partnerships, and it seems like maybe that's something that this group will be like explicitly focused on.
I mean, they sell ads for their TV shows pretty successfully, right? So this is a much smoother operation going into effect, right? And weirdly, no one suggested this as a solution to NWSL's problems. And not that this will solve everything, but this is definitely, it seems to me there's no downside.
I don't think so. I mean, I think the only thing right now is just that they haven't announced how they're going to be handling the streaming, because that's another component.
Yes. Well, the thing I read, I think Jeff Kassouf from 442, who's like really good on women's soccer, knows a lot of stuff, was I think his understanding, he's someone who's a little bit in the know, was that just streaming via YouTube is an option, but it will be more professional than the team-by-team stuff that was happening last time.
I see.
So it's a little bit like USL Productions, right? The way they're sort of bringing it in-house. The alternative could be they create their own digital platform, not on YouTube. It's their own digital platform, which they own and control, and then they can have their own branding across it.
I guess the only downside I could see is that if you are trying to get women's soccer to a level of like, you know, anyone should be watching it, male, female, whatever your age, whatever your demographic, you should be interested in soccer because it's, you know, top tier athletes playing a sport at a very high competitive level.
Yeah.
It makes it far less likely, I think, that, you know, a 20-something man is going to just flip over to Lifetime randomly. Whereas if it were on ESPN, ESPN2, or Fox, maybe that's a little bit more likely.
Yeah, I definitely see that argument, but I can also see the idea of why don't we go to where the women are? And there may be someone who'd never even considered soccer, but then watches NWSL and is like, oh, I kind of like this.
Yeah, and I think, I think that's why it's probably the smarter move, because it's kind of like staying your lane, knowing your market.
Yeah.
It's not trying to appeal to everyone. It's basically picking out the demographic that you know is going to be looking for soccer or is going to be looking for, you know, like strong female figures to watch with their daughters or however it may be. I think it makes sense for that reason as well.
And then the soccer nerds like us will still go watch it on Lifetime. So Lifetime get us, and whereas before they probably wouldn't, right? Yeah.
And then we stick around for whatever, I don't know what movies.
The Ronda Rousey movie.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's going to be. I'm sure one will be a biopic, and then we'll go from there.
One other thing I read, guess which network is in more homes? Lifetime, ESPN, or Fox Sports?
I'm going to guess Lifetime based on what you've said.
It has the most availability.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I would not have guessed that because I feel like ESPN is just kind of basic standard in every single package.
I think so is Lifetime.
So how is it in more then?
I have no idea, but that's what I just read.
These sound like alternative facts.
They are not. They're actual facts. All right, so good news for the NWSL. We're going to look ahead to US men's national team against Jamaica. The game is this Friday in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff, they say, so more like 7:20.
Or 8, who knows.
Or 8. But maybe tune in at 7 just to see Landon Donovan. It's going to be on Fox Sports 1. Big preview coming up. Right, Bruce Arena's second game in charge. I think many people disappointed with the 0-0 draw against Serbia. Total Soccer Show a bit more optimistic about some of the things we saw, like some good things in place. Let's start with our expectations for this game, just in terms of making Darrell and Taylor happy.
Sure. In terms of making Darrell and Taylor happy, I think they're going to be fairly similar to what my expectations or hopes were. My expectation hopes were for the USA-Serbia game, which is that, again, I want to see consistency. I want to see players knowing their role and executing those roles and having clear instructions. Yeah, exactly. Because, for example, my expectation, I know we're going to do lineups later, is that you'll probably get Sebastian Lletget starting in central midfield, maybe Dax McCarty. Yeah. But either way, it will be kind of a first start in that spot. Either ever or in a very long time in Dax McCarty's case. So I want to see those players not look lost. I want to see them clearly have been given instructions and drilled and know what their roles are supposed to be.
Okay, so this is the same stuff we wanted in the Serbia game,
yes,
right?
I think the difference, the kind of add-on to that would be similar to what Matt Doyle talked about, is you want to see them learning lessons. So I think we were okay with the kind of support Josie Altidore had.
Yeah.
But as Matt Doyle pointed out, maybe there wasn't so much attack on the wings.
Yeah.
So I want to see maybe Bruce Arena has juggled things, changed things around, worked a little bit on how to get those wingers more involved in the attack, and then that will show against Jamaica. That's something I'd like to see.
More of a goal threat maybe from one of the wings, like specifically Bedoya's wing, right? Because Nagby got a couple of shots away, but on the left. But from the right wing, you want more of a goal threat, either from Bedoya himself or maybe from different personnel.
Yeah, or even just I can't really, and maybe this is just me having a bad memory, I can't really remember a lot of times that Josie shifted from one side to the other, and so I feel like he generally stayed kind of central or dropped back. And so even I
liked that though, because it doesn't take him all the way out of the middle.
That's true, but even if I feel like if maybe there were situations in which he drifts to one side, but it's intentional to overload to create space on the other side, or even just to set up some 1-2s, I wouldn't mind seeing that.
Well, before we get into we'll get into lineup later, so I don't want to take us too deep down this hole. But for me, if it's say Jordan Morris on the wing, then Josie Altidore can drift from the centre out to the right or the left, and then Morris can drift in, and they can do that classic striker crossover run, even though one of them was on the wing. Almost like this is a very high level example, but Ronaldo and Benzema. Yeah. Benzema would drift to the left, Ronaldo would come in from the left and be central and be a goal threat.
Yeah,
right? So all I want is for the US national team to be as good as Real Madrid. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. But so do you echo that idea? And I think that's fair. Do you echo the idea then that you would like to see some more attacking play specifically from the wings?
Well, not just specifically from the wings. It's more that So I kind of made excuses for the US national team not scoring against Serbia, and good excuses in that Serbia's defensive shape was really good. It was January, so sometimes the final pass wasn't perfect. I look at this Jamaica roster. It is roughly half MLS, half domestic Jamaican League players. So I don't know the name of the Jamaican League, right? You haven't got, say, Wes Morgan in there. Right. You know what I mean? There's some higher profile Jamaican players missing from this roster. I think second game it's February now, right? But second game in the January camp, which takes place in February, against, I want to say, a lower standard of opposition than the Serbian domestic league roster that Serbia sent. US has to score and win in this game. I know this is getting back to very basics, but I would not be as accepting of an impressive performance in terms of lots of passing with no end product in this game. Because then suddenly we're going into March against Honduras where it really matters, and you've got 2 games where we say haven't scored or haven't looked as threatening as we should have.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting for the USA, this is their second friendly. For Jamaica, it's their first. They have this one, then I think like 2 weeks later they play Honduras.
Yeah,
I think it was. It's a stranger setup. I'm not sure what that's about. But maybe they just want to like really set it up for MLS preseason. Who knows? So it's also worth noting that it's not like a Jamaica team that's been training, has already had another friendly. This is their second friendly. They've kind of gelled a little bit. That said, it didn't stop Serbia from playing cohesively, so who knows for sure.
But they had a whole camp and they came over and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Mostly very basic thing. I'm just looking for the US to score and win. That's my expectation for this game.
Which, without offending, which thing would be greater culture shock? Going from Serbia in January to California, or going from Jamaica to Tennessee? Which one do you think is like harder to adjust to?
The first one, right? Tennessee's got to be pretty warm. This time of year. Actually, I'm not very good with where Tennessee is geographically.
I know when we went similar to Richmond, I think.
We went to Nashville in April and it was hot, right? So there's that.
That's all it takes? So it must be hot all the time?
Yes. And I say this because I saw Serbia preparing. They prepared in the snow, right? There was a training session and it was snowing, and then they came over to California, Southern California.
A fair point. Okay, fair point then.
Quick look at Jamaica's roster. Not that many players we're familiar with. Ones that stand out that obviously MLS fans will know. Andre Blake in goal, Philadelphia Union keeper. His highlight reel is terrifying.
Yeah, it's a man who made you say, "I wish he played for us."
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he can't, but
yeah,
just when you face him, you're like, oh.
I'm fairly certain that he cannot. Yeah, that's correct.
So many good things I see with Andre Blake. Positioning seems great. I see him catch a lot of crosses. Seems to have this long reach when he comes out for crosses. I also noticed, we talked about Nick Raimondo sort of accidentally parrying that shot back into traffic. Every highlight I see of Andre Blake, he gets that ball out of there. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like a save and a tip around the post, or send it way out for a throw-in, nothing drops back in front of the box. Watch him do it and land the ball at Josie's feet now.
It could happen. I'm looking forward to the start of MLS season because that means that we're going to go back and review our predictions from last season. And I know I made one about Andre Blake, and I think it was about how he was going to be...
he'll play against the US in February in Chattanooga?
I think that's what it was. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I think it was about how he was going to be a very consistent player for Philadelphia and maybe become like a household name or something like that. I mean, and he is not a household name. I'm not going to exaggerate that, but he's a very good goalkeeper, and it is sort of, if you're looking for the U.S. to get goals against this Jamaica team that probably isn't their top team, it isn't going to be as easy as it looks just because they have such an experienced goalkeeper in net.
And as we said, no Wes Morgan, which
might be a benefit
to us or them.
The way he played in the Gold Cup. The way he played in the Gold Cup, the way he's...
Copa America, the way he played Copa America.
The way he's been for Leicester this season, he hasn't looked particularly motivated when playing for Jamaica, so who knows if maybe they get somebody else in who really wants to be there and prove himself.
So there is, I think, Alvas Powell. The confusing thing here is Jamaica listed their roster. Alvas Powell, Portland Timbers, attacking right back, I want to call him, was on there. On the US Soccer website, they listed the Jamaica roster. He wasn't on there.
He was not, but Alan Oti of the Montego Bay United was included. But
Montego Bay United?
Yeah, that's what I've called him. But he doesn't look like he is on the roster. So it seems like maybe US Soccer really, really misspelled Alvas Powell. I'm not sure.
So we'll see. But we're going to go on the basis that Alvas Powell is playing.
We are.
That's of interest to me because we see him for Portland. He's like really dangerous getting forward. So whoever's the US left back could be his former teammate, Villafana. Could be Powell overlapping against Villafana and vice versa. So that's something to be concerned about.
I'd say something to be concerned about is that we don't know, you and I at least, don't really know any of their midfielders.
Right.
I mean, you have, I guess, Omar Holness is the lone MLS player. He says, looking at the roster really fast. So it's kind of an unknown quantity there. So,
no Giles Barnes, which is what I was expecting. I don't understand why that is. Maybe Houston didn't want to release him. It could be something like that.
Maybe he just wasn't called up. Who knows? Maybe he also has underperformed because Jamaica haven't looked as strong as they have in years past.
Didn't make the Hex, right? Just in case anyone was wondering. One player we have seen in action is Romario Williams. Now of Atlanta United. We saw him playing for Charleston in the USL.
We sure did.
Last season. I don't want to say he's a massive international danger, but he's only 22 and he did look, I want to say, strong and lively and troublesome when he played for Charleston against Richmond Kickers.
And I think it was, not to oversell his abilities, but it reminds me a little bit of what Giovinco brings, where it's this smaller, because he's 5'10", thereabouts.
5'9".
Yeah, so he's not the big, not Giovinco, Romario Williams. He's not the biggest guy, but he's very strong, very fast. And I remember against the Kickers, who have two very big center backs, he posed problems because, number one, a big guy up against a littler guy goes down, that's going to be a free kick. But it was just also he was able to sort of run in behind, run between, and kind of discombobulate a little bit. And so he's very smart in his running, and I think could cause problems for a backline if Bruce Arena decides to experiment a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So, again, we'll talk about that when we get to picking up.
Because we saw Steve Birnbaum doing the fist pump when they were getting the offsides correct. Yes. So it seems like something they really, really worked on. And so you wonder if they're going to keep that same back four in place.
I think Romario Williams could mess that up.
We shall see.
Oh, okay. Shall we talk about the US sort of shape and formation and strategy that we most want to see?
Sure.
And I want to give you a leading question. Do you want to see the same shape and kind of approach as we saw against Serbia?
Yes, absolutely.
So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
If we do go out and suddenly we're not going to go wing backs, right? Bruce has been very clear about that. But say we go out in a 4-4-2 instead of the 4-1-4-1/4-2-3-1 we saw against Serbia. Will you be massively upset or just kind of disappointed?
I will be okay with it until I hear Bruce Arena's explanations in the post-match presser or at halftime or whatever. Because if he switched to a 4-4-2, again, the thing that we want to stick with, the thing that you and I think, want with this U.S. team is clear instructions, consistency, and players understanding what their responsibilities are.
Right.
Not much to ask.
Right. And so that's what their roles are within a system. So you're saying stick with that same system?
Yes. And so we had some people criticize us for criticizing the USA's previous manager, so I won't name his name. I'll just say it does seem like under the previous manager, say they did switch to a 4-4-2 after playing a 4-1-4-1,
right,
that maybe the explanation might have been we just wanted to see what could happen. We wanted, and if Bruce Arena were to say, we noticed this. We noticed that we could overload on this side if we have two strikers. If we get this, if he has a clear explanation for why they've done it, then I'm more okay with it.
I see.
If it's, we wanted to see what could happen and do this, then again, I'm frustrated because it doesn't point to building towards a specific approach for March. It points to, we're figuring stuff out.
See, for me, even if there's a switch up and it's a way to beat Jamaica, I'm still going to be slightly annoyed because I want us to be building towards Honduras.
Yeah.
So I want the shape that we start with against Honduras to be the shape that we started with against Serbia, tinkered with and slightly improved against Jamaica, and then got perfect against Honduras, and then we get a 2-0 win and everybody's happy.
I agree. And I think, and I'll add that you kind of talked me into this because there was
I'm very persuasive sometimes.
You are, but there was some discussion of experimentation, which to get to that, actually, we had a question from Jason Tenbrink, who asks, what did you all think of Juan Agadelo's performance against Serbia? There was a lot to talk about from Sunday's game being Serbia, and I don't think talking about his performance made the cut.
I thought we did, and then when we got this email from Jason, I was like, we forgot to talk about Juan Agudelo.
Yeah, because and to be fair, it wasn't the longest of appearances for him.
I think it was maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
There we go.
Yeah, okay.
Jason says, I will say that although he was only on for a couple of minutes, there we go, he had a couple of eyebrow-raising plays. The specific one that comes to mind was when he managed to keep possession and make a pass up to Jordan Morris, even though he was being clobbered by about 8 Serbs.
I love the use of the word clobbered.
I love the use of the word Serbs as well. So he mentions Juan Agudelo, and I was really impressed by him. He seemed lively. He seemed up for it. He seemed like he was trying to make things happen, which does seem like something that maybe he was instructed to go in there and cause havoc or whatever. And so you kind of made me a believer in the idea of starting him out wide in this game.
Right. Well, I wasn't pushing for starting so much as having him as an option. So one of the reasons we talked about this is when Agudelo came on, that last 5 minutes or so, we changed shape, right? We kind of went to a diamond and 2 up front, right? So we had 2 strikers. I I don't want us to have to change shape to accommodate Agudelo. I would like to see if he could contribute to the US as one of those wide attackers.
Right.
And this is just me, again, being kind of all on the bandwagon of let's get some pace out wide. Let's get some threat out wide.
But see, yeah, and that's where I think
late in the game.
That's where you sold me because and the same thing you were talking about Jordan Morris, and I kind of had it in my head that Bruce Arena had said like he's going to be a number 9 for us. That's where he's going to be.
Yeah.
And so if that's what you say, then I want to see him stay there. I don't want to suddenly see him out wide. But in reality, what he has said is he's a 9, he's a 7, he's an 11, whatever. So that can also point to him playing out wide. That's where he plays for Seattle. So I do then think about the idea of like, say, I don't know if it will happen, but say you started Jordan Morris and Juan Agudelo. That points to Bruce Arena seeing that and saying, we didn't have that much pace, we didn't have good attacking play, we didn't have that kind of pace in behind where we could break the trap. So I want to try that and see if these two guys can get the job done and how they interact with Josie Altidore. Then again, like that is, again, a sign that you're building and you're kind of progressing, figuring out what little combinations can work, and you're tinkering to get to the ideal setup and system.
It's a bit more gung-ho, right? Because the way we went out against Serbia, if you think of the wide guys, it was Nagbe on the left and it was Bedoya on the right, right? And Nagbe is a bit more of a direct threat. Bedoya is very much like a hard-working, will do the defensive work. Nagbe will also do the defensive work. So there's not much of a gamble there. I want to say that against Jamaica, it's a little more similar to what we're going to face when we play Honduras and Panama, I think, in that we may have sort of a stacked defense to try and break down and not worry too much about the counter-attack, especially if we get to the last half an hour, right? And we really do need to win and we want to take some gambles. So to me, taking those gambles mean making those wide guys people who are not necessarily going to do defensive jobs but are going to do attacking jobs that is really threatening.
What you've just made me realize, first of all, very good point. Second of all, this might be one of my favorite January opponents that we've scheduled in a very long time.
Jamaica? Or
Serbia? Jamaica. Yeah. Because I'm realizing it's a CONCACAF opponent, which is helpful for qualification, and it's kind of representative, I think, of what the United States is going to face, as you said, but more specifically because it's going to be Panama away, so Panama at home, where they're going to be maybe a little more inclined to go out and try to get the results. So... And I think that does equate to Jamaica here because it's an unproven team. They're trying new things as well. They want to get the result too. So maybe they'll be a little bit more adventurous and aggressive, but by the same token, they might also sit back and kind of defend heartily, which is what I expect Honduras to do. So it could be kind of either one. It gives you experience with either or both.
I've got a question here as well I want to ask that I think is very interesting from Scott Blake. So Scott has questions about the very idea of the January camp as we build towards the World Cup qualifier in March.
Right.
Okay. So Scott says, in a January camp, do you select a team, formation and strategy based on the players you have in camp, or do you select a formation and strategy based on your full-strength team, which will include all the European-based players? So, for example, if we know that Pulisic will be the right winger for the qualifiers in March, do you play a formation against, say, Serbia and Jamaica in this case, that plays to Pulisic's strengths and ignore the fact that the winger doing that job doesn't have the same skill set? So in this instance, against Serbia, it was Alejandro Bedoya. So I guess he's asking, do you say to Bedoya, like, do what Pulisic would have done, and we like balance the team that way?
I don't think you go that far.
That seems too extreme, right?
Especially because if the whole idea is that you're giving players this idea that they can prove themselves and be in the starting 11, you don't want to then be like, do what the actual starter is going to do. But I think you can look at the roster you have and identify the depth that you have. Which
the roster being the full roster.
Yeah, which is what Bruce Arena did like his first day, right? He had an idea of the pool, he had an idea of what he wanted to do.
Yeah, he'd been working on that for a couple of months.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, as Wendy Thomas told us, that it was like very like when the United States was losing to Costa Rica is when people contacted the LA Galaxy.
Bruce Arena had a depth chart Word doc on his desktop.
You think it was a Word doc?
I think it was
not an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc or something?
It wasn't in the cloud.
Okay, he wouldn't risk that. So I don't think it's just as simple as do what this guy would do.
Yeah.
But I do think you evaluate your talent and you figure out where you want to have people play or try people and see if they fit. And with that, it's because you want people to be doing a very specific thing or a somewhat specific thing. So, for example, what I talked about with why you'd want to play Graham Zusi at right back is because in my mind, he is, first and foremost, or throughout his career, has been a right-sided attacker who can get in and get those crosses in. And that kind of, to me, sounds like DeAndre Yedlin when he's playing right back, which is can get forward, can be aggressive in the attack, can be there to help with the attack, but isn't going to be your primary outlet.
But you do get a very different thing, right? I think that's a good comparison.
No, I think they're just as fast.
but like even like say Zuzi's crosses are much I want to say more accurate and bendy than a DeAndre Yedlin cross. I would say Zuzi's a bit more conservative in terms of getting forward because he doesn't want to leave space behind him. Yedlin, that's kind of his second concern at all times, right?
Right. And I realize I'm about to jinx myself and that Brad Evans is going to start at right back, but I still think it points to the idea that he wants an attacking right back. And so he's looking at people who could potentially perform that role, either could start there over DeAndre Yedlin or could be substitutes if DeAndre Yedlin isn't good to go or isn't playing really well.
Someone, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, linked us to a big soccer discussion that was happening. Did you read this or did just I read this?
I think just you read that.
So the argument in that sort of discussion forum, which I found quite convincing, was that Zuzi is a potential later in the game substitute. Again, if we're up against Honduras and it's 20 minutes to go and they've stacked their defence and they're sitting back, right? Yedlin's not doing it because his pace isn't that useful against a stacked opponent. So you're better off replacing Yedlin with Zusi, who can come on for 25 minutes, so he's second choice right back, but he can come on and provide some crosses from the right that Yedlin couldn't, right? So what I've got in mind here is that means that the team that Arena picks for Serbia and Jamaica is close enough to an actual full-strength starting 11. You know, Bradley's there, Altidor's there, right? That there are only a few pieces different, and some of the pieces that you're experimenting with could still be late-game subs or involved in those full-strength games.
And that's the other component that I think is important to mention here is that I think it's more than a few, because by my account, maybe 5 of the guys who are going to be available against Jamaica, that would be Jonathan Nagbe, Josie Altidore, Michael Bradley, and then some combination of Benny Feilhaber, Sebastian Lletget, maybe Sasha Kleshton, who has been sent home. More on that in a second. But I think so you are going to have some of those names in there starting in those World Cup qualifiers. And so it makes sense to kind of get them familiar with what you think they're going to be doing in those qualifiers, so that you're not just playing for these 2 games with the players you have and then starting all over again when those qualifiers come around. You've got like these 5 guys who remember what you did last time? Okay, you're going to do that. Let's focus on you guys who weren't here in camp. And you can sort of spend a little bit more time getting everybody on the same page because you've already done some of that initial legwork.
Because the whole thing's changed, right? It's not like the days when Bradley and Altidore were in Europe and so your key players weren't available for January. Now you do have kind of the spine of your team is there, more or less, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about maybe the players that are missing from this roster. The 2 obvious ones are, we had 23 for the roster against Serbia. We lost 2 people. Jermaine Jones was sent back or allowed to go back to the LA Galaxy. And the reason is essentially that he's suspended for the Honduras game, so we don't necessarily need him and we need to try out some other people for that spot. And he's only really just joined the LA Galaxy, despite that being a long-known thing. It's only just become official. He needs to get in there and get some preseason, get familiar there.
He does.
Right? Sasha Kleshton, I think his wife is expecting their second child, so he was allowed to go back to the New York Red Bulls. So suddenly, we only have 21 people on this roster.
Yes. Yeah, which is not a lot. Given that you have 6 subs, 7 subs, 8 subs, 9 subs, I don't know, 14, who knows.
And I looked at the roster in terms of people who haven't played yet that are remaining on the roster. There's only DeMarcus Beasley, Brad Evans, Walker Zimmerman, centre-back, and Dax McCarty. So that's only 4 players that haven't, excluding goalkeepers, of course.
With you,
So, who do we think benefits from Jones and Kleshton not being around?
I think it's a clear-cut answer. I think it's Benny Feilhaber, because it does seem like Sasha Kleshton was the guy, near the end of Jurgen Klinsmann's tenure. It does seem like Bruce Arena feels the same way about Sasha Kleshton. But we agreed, he didn't look that strong against Serbia. It looked like he'd been a little bit lost. I think Matt Doyle echoed that, which is that he is going to play those really great passes because he does it so often, at least for New York. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to come off, and he's going to be able to execute consistently for the U.S.
For anyone who didn't hear, Matt's point was that playing for New York, the way they play, he gets a lot of chances to do that, and he gets a lot of chances to do it on the turnover because the Red Bulls press so high. Whereas for the US, your chances to do it are much more limited, and maybe he's not as effective when the number of opportunities is smaller.
And again, it's not fair to judge his entire career by this one game, by the Serbia game, nor would I try to. But
I still like it. I still would be happy to see him start against Honduras.
But Benny Feilhaber did look good, and he did kind of have a few of those passes that, as I said, reminded me oh, right, this is why everyone thinks he should be playing for the U.S. And if he comes out and shreds that Jamaica defense and finds those holes and plays in perfect through balls and has the pace on the wings to be able to play those through balls, maybe...
You mean people to aim at?
Yeah, maybe Bruce Arena thinks, let's keep an eye on this a little bit more than we would be otherwise. So I think Sasha Kljestan is probably not thrilled, or as thrilled as he would be with that second kid.
He could be watching the game biting his nails a little bit.
Yeah. So I think Benny Feilhaber definitely benefits. And I think Jermaine Jones maybe doesn't necessarily benefit, but I think maybe wasn't, like Bruce Arena wasn't quite sure what he was about, where he was in terms of physicality, in terms of fitness coming into this camp. And I think now knows, like, oh, he's just going to be fit forever. So I don't need to worry about this. He can go home. He'll be ready when I need him.
He starts against Panama probably, right?
Now, speaking of Jermaine Jones, though, wanted to mention this. We had a tweet from, I think it was a tweet from Blue City Radio.
Yes.
Who said, I like the talk about Jones and Leggett, and kind of kindly, gently pointed out that I had said that I was okay with Sebastian Leggett continuing to get time for the U.S. as that kind of defensive midfielder destroyer.
As the Jermaine Jones replacement, essentially. Yeah. That's what he did in the second half against Serbia. He did a great Jermaine Jones impression.
He did. And so my point was, as long as he continues to do that at club level and get that experience, then I won't mind seeing him in contention come March.
Yeah.
Blue City Radio pointed out that Jermaine Jones has just signed for Sebastian Leggett's club and will almost certainly be playing the Jermaine Jones role. So with that in mind, I don't really know anymore, is my honest answer. I'm not sure what to expect or how that works.
I don't think this is as black and white as Blue City Radio's question raises. Because you can... Okay, there's a Jermaine Jones role on the US men's national team.
Very good point.
And it's in between, like... you're part of a midfield three of a deep-lying midfielder, Michael Bradley playing number 6, a more advanced passer, like a number 10-ish type character like Kljestan or Feilhaber, and then there's the Jermaine Jones role going box to box in between, okay? So on the US national team, there's only one spot, right? But that doesn't mean that the way LA Galaxy line up, that you don't have two energetic midfielders. It may even be to LA Galaxy's advantage to have Leggett and Jones, because then you have all kinds of ground covered and tackles covered in midfield, right?
But I would even take it a step further and think about what he was doing with Colorado at the end of last season, where he was more of like an attacking midfielder, Jermaine Jones. That he was really a big provider. Now, certainly getting up and down the field, because that's what he does, and he's going to run over every blade of grass, every inch of the field.
And every opponent.
Yeah, but it could well be that Jermaine Jones is the one who's pushed forward a little bit more, or is given the sort of free role to kind of run around and do what you want, and then Leggett is going to be the one to stay home and handle things.
That's true.
So it's kind of, it could go either way. Or maybe Leggett deputizes for Jones and learns from him, and then sometimes plays out wide. Could be any combination thereof.
And if he has to be more restrained, Leggett has to be more restrained for the LA Galaxy, but then if he does replace Jones on the national team and is allowed a bit more freedom, he's a smart enough player that it doesn't mean he can't do both things. It's only a slight tweak in instructions, which is kind of what you get when you go from club soccer to international soccer anyway. Right?
Yeah.
Like, Josie Altidore doesn't get to bring Giovinco with him when he plays for the US national team,
Sadly.
For example.
Sadly.
Right?
Although I feel like, Italy aren't calling him anymore. They've disrespected him. I feel like it's only fair, right? We should be able to have him switch, even though he's definitely played for Italy at competitive tournaments. The other thing I would say about Jermaine Jones really quickly is, as we learned last season, he can get an injury and can be out for a while. Also is a hothead, could get suspended for a while. So in which case you are going to want that cover. So Jermaine Jones is an injury, maybe a possibility. Another guy who also has his fair share of injuries or history of injuries is Will Trapp. And we had an email about that as well from Andrew Baird.
Yeah, so Andrew Baird asked, so Will Trapp was dropped from the original 30-plus January camp when they trimmed it down to 23, right? And Andrew Baird emailed us at that point. He said, what do you make of Will Trapp getting cut from January camp? Exactly how big a deal is this? I know Daryl is the driver of the Will Trapp bandwagon, so I'll try to keep it short and tread lightly here. I mean, I can turn that bandwagon in dangerous directions if I get angry. I just wonder if this is something you feel like you can shrug off and say, there's always the Gold Cup this summer, or is this something that maybe we should be a bit more concerned about? And by more concerned, I mean this was his third consecutive January camp, and he's still yet to convert any of those camps into meaningful minutes for the full men's national team.
Speaking of converting things, I feel like there's a chance that Daryl Grove has kind of parked the Will Trapp bandwagon and is maybe using that for parts in case parts on the Emerson Hyndman bandwagon break down, and you can kind of switch them over.
The Emerson Hyndman it's not a bandwagon; it's more like a race car.
I see. Okay,
full speed ahead.
I don't think it's like a huge deal, but I think it's definitely not great news for Will Trapp.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to stay as part of the roster would have been better than to be cut, right? That's true. But the part that Andrew highlighted was that, like, his third January camp in a row. You got to remember that's interrupted by Will Trapp's concussions, right? Which are a huge deal and really stalled his career, stopped him playing for. I actually don't know the full length of time, but it was months and months where he could not play. The other thing is Michael Bradley sort of has the spot.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We're not looking for a Michael Bradley replacement for March. And even if it was, I don't think Bruce Arena will be comfortable. Say Michael Bradley was injured, he's not going to just drop Will Trapp into that spot in a huge World Cup qualifier because he just doesn't have the experience. Arena really does value experience, like veteran experience. That's why DeMarcus Beasley, Brad Evans are on this roster.
Yes, and so I think, if anything, it was Will Trapp being brought in to kind of evaluate fitness, see where he was, see what he was capable of. You get a read.
Bruce to get to know him.
Yeah, but I think it was him being sent home does indicate that he won't be up for serious consideration anytime soon.
True.
Now, that, again, could put my foot in my mouth, might be called in March, who knows. But it seems more like Bruce Arena was trying to trim down his options for that March roster, and I'm guessing he looked at Will Trapp and said, not quite yet, maybe get a season in MLS, maybe the Gold Cup's an option, but I think there's a chance that it won't be until after Bruce Arena's tenure that Will Trapp starts getting serious consideration. And that's not because Bruce Arena doesn't like him or anything like that. It's just because, as you pointed out, there are other players who are ahead of him.
It's a Klinsmann phrase.
Yeah, there are other players who are ahead of him who are going to be aging out as we get further along.
Right, because you've got so there's no more Carl Beckerman, we assume, right? But you've got Jermaine Jones, Michael Bradley, Sasha Cleston, Benny Feilhaber, just in terms of midfielders. Sebastian Lletget is now in there. Dax McCarty's back in the fold. There's suddenly a lot of midfielders, a lot of midfield competition.
Yeah, and Sebastian Lletget's significantly younger than everyone else you just listed there. But yeah, so I think for Will Trapp, it's maybe a better opportunity to really focus on getting back to fitness, getting ready for the season, and being a really big performer for Columbus this season.
Yes, I agree. Okay, are we ready to pick our US starting 11 for the Jamaica game?
Sure. Do you want to start?
You don't seem fully confident.
Well, I'm not fully confident only because there's a couple positions that I'm just really not certain of, and it's the biggest one is the one that we're going to start with, which is goalkeeper. Because I don't know what we kind of agreed that against Serbia, Bruce Arena did not want to risk conceding goals. He did not want to risk losing that game.
He wanted to trust an experience.
So he was going to go with experience. Yeah. I don't know if he does that in this game.
So that's the experience being Nick Romando. That's who started against Serbia. The options for the second game are pretty much Robles or David Bingham. And they both have 2 caps. They both seem like equally experienced, inexperienced. I mean, neither of them are like super young. Neither of them super old. I think Robles is in his 30s, right? But that's not old for a goalkeeper, right? You can easily get many more years out of him. So it's really a toss-up. I just don't know.
There's been so much change with the goalkeepers as well because Bill Hamid's gone home, Stephen Fry's gone home. Was David Bingham one of the ones that was initially called into camp? Because I think he was.
Yes.
Right.
So it's Brian Rowe who was called in late.
Thank you.
Right.
I forgot he's not even listed. I don't think. So,
and he was really called in late. Well, I mean, Wendy Thomas does this. He was called in late because he was the LA Galaxy goalkeeper who was in the area. And
fair.
Bruce knew him.
But with that in mind, I think if Bruce Arena does decide to switch it up, which I'm going to lean towards he will, then I'm just going to say, based on the fact that Bingham has been there from the beginning of camp, I'm going to say David Bingham starts this game.
Was Robles not there at the beginning?
I think he was a late addition as well, but I could be totally wrong. I often am. But as I recall, it was It was Romando, Fry, Bingham, and Hamid. Those are the 4 that I remember.
Okay.
And then maybe Robles was there too. I can't remember if there were 5 or not. Okay. But I'm going Bingham because it fits what I'm trying to say. So there we go.
Well, how about this? They're going to go half each.
Okay.
Robles gets a half, Bingham gets a half.
So then who starts? I'm sticking...
Robles or Bingham?
No, that's not allowed. It's got to be one or the other. I'm not giving
Bingham.
you that. You're saying Bingham too?
Yep.
Copycat. All right.
So back 4, right? It's going to be a back 4 because I think it's going to be this 4-1-4-1. They might call it a 4-2-3-1, but it's going to be, for argument's sake, we'll say it's a 4-1-4-1 because Bradley will be the sort of lone number 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your right back?
Graham Zusi.
Graham Zusi?
I think you stick with him and see if he can handle 2 games in a row. Maybe Jamaica throw a little bit more. Maybe they try to focus on that side because now they know that he's going to be starting and he has less experience there. You see if he can roll with it.
So the alternative would be Brad Evans, but I'm not sure Arena's in the mood for a look at Brad Evans.
I don't know.
I say that just because he's not going to be this long-term option.
Yeah.
He's looking for more depth at right back. He seems to think Zusi's the way to go. Brad Evans, I think, is there for personality.
Sure.
Because everyone likes him.
And to high-five Chad Marshall on Friends Day or whatever it was. And then at left back, I've got Jorge Villafana.
I do too. Yeah, only because Arena seemed very impressed with him that half an hour he got against Serbia. So I think maybe give him a full game. And again, the Powell versus Villafana battle on the flank, I think that's one of the things worth tuning in for.
Yeah, and then if you missed our review of the Serbia game, he did not talk about Greg Garza. He being Arena. So maybe that points to he's not going to consider him. Then DeMarcus Beasley, maybe again like Brad Evans brought in for personality, for veteran experience.
I think so.
And maybe not going to get a start. Maybe he'll get some minutes. Who can say for sure?
So, centre-backs. I'm going Birnbaum and Marshall. We start the same starting pair as against Serbia because it looked good, because it's working. And I think Walker Zimmerman maybe gets either a half or half an hour.
I agree, but I'm going to say Birnbaum and Zimmerman just to be contrarian.
All right, so ahead of them,
Michael Bradley
in the number 6 role, right? I kind of enjoy knowing the shape of the team and feeling confident about it. Then we've been saying Feilhaber as one of the attacking midfielders.
Absolutely.
I think we're there on that. I think Nagbe goes into that spot afterwards. So Nagbe's going to be my starting 11. I feel like maybe with 60 minutes gone, Feilhaber comes off for a winger. Nagbe comes and plays number 10.
Okay.
So I'm saying we'll get a look at him in that role.
Okay. But who do you think starts as the third central option?
I think it's Sebastian Lletget.
I agree.
And then I think also Dax McCarthy gets some minutes, but it's Sebastian Lletget.
I had both of. I had Lletget / Dax, and I circled Lletget. So
I think because I do think Arena was impressed with. And I'm basing a lot of this on his post-match comments. He was impressed with Lletget's performance, the half against Serbia. So the natural progression is to give him a start, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we kind of agreed on midfield then?
Yep, absolutely. We don't kind of. We do completely. Which means I think we also agree on who's going to start on the left, which is Darlington Nagbe, based on what you were saying.
It would make sense, right? It would make sense based on the previous game.
So then who have you got on the right?
So we have Josie Altidore as centre forward. Yeah. On the right, I have Morris / Bedoya, and I'm open to being persuaded either way.
Oh, I'm not going to persuade you with either, because I've gone full Juan. I'm going Juan Agudelo.
To start?
Why not?
Whoa.
Why not?
Love it. Okay, yeah, it's a big gamble.
So, I mean, but I think you could make the argument of it'll be Bedoya because that's who started the first game. You want to give him another chance. You want to see if he can kind of perform, I would say, better. Not that he had a bad game, but just that, again, he didn't really create much attacking-wise. And he still kind of...
He did have that one sort of square ball that he played across that nearly resulted in a strike.
He also had those moments of, like, obvious frustration that he doesn't really hide. And I wonder if maybe that was because they had worked on other things that didn't quite come out, and so maybe he'll get a chance to get more involved in the attack. I could also see Jordan Morris because it's Jordan Morris, and he does have the pace and the physicality.
It could also flip Nagbe on the right and Morris on the left, because everyone likes Morris on the left with his right foot like he did for Seattle in the MLS Cup run.
So who are you going to pick then?
I'm going to go with that. I think this was my original predicted lineup against Serbia, was Morris on the left, Nagbe on the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going for it.
And I'm going Nagbe on the left, Agudelo on the right.
Okay.
So we shall see.
We'll find out who's right on Friday night. We'll be watching the game in studio. We'll have a review show out that night. So late Friday night, expect the TSS review of USA versus Jamaica. Fox Sports 1, officially a 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern kickoff. Hey guys, Daryl cutting in here. I hope you enjoyed our preview. We have some late breaking news that just came out after Taylor had left the studio. We have updates via Doug McIntyre, who was in Chattanooga, I believe. Bruce Arena says he will change the shape. He's going to go 2 forwards and a different midfield shape against Jamaica. Villafaña and Zimmerman will start. So 2 forwards likely means a pairing of maybe Altidore and Morris, maybe Altidore and Agudelo. Arena also says that Luis Robles will start in goal. So I've got to say, as mentioned at the top of the show, I'm kind of disappointed because I wanted to see this 4-1-4-1 tweaked and made perfect, ready for March. But I guess we'll just see what happens Friday night with 2 forwards against Jamaica. Okay, stick around for the final 2 segments of the show. We're going to have some suggested other names for Major League Soccer franchises, thanks to a great listener question. But first, here's a word from our sponsor. Thank you, Dowell and Taylor. You guys were very good, as usual. We have scouting reports to come later on today's show. But first, a really exciting question. I love this listener question. It's from John Adams. Would you like to set it up, Taylor?
Sure. John is in the scouting network. Well, he's a member of the scouting network, I guess, because he's scouting Sheon Harrison, plays for Tottenham Hotspur, on loan currently at Yeovil Town, which John discovered they're called the Glovers, because of the gloving industry, or the glove manufacturing industry in Yeovil. So John said, with Sheon now playing for Yeovil Town and their ties to making hand garments, I got to thinking about what various teams in the U.S. might be called if their current name didn't already tie into a city's history. Some clubs already fit nicely, like the Seattle Sounders, Portland Timbers, and Chicago Fire, while others might be a bit more ambiguous or don't have a nickname that fans outside of that team might know. So he's got 2 questions. The first one being, could you guys maybe talk about some of the team names in MLS, maybe USL or NASL, that either have lesser-known nicknames that tie into their town or region, or make up some better nicknames for those lacking a regional tie-in?
Okay, so we'll start with maybe some of the team names that aren't immediately obvious. Right? So, for example, Seattle Sounders, because the Seattle Sound, right? It's kind of straightforward. But I'm going to go with, first of all, Columbus Crew. Yep. I researched Columbus Crew. I actually really like the name Columbus Crew. It is deliberately a nod to the city's sort of blue-collar industry, but then it was alliterative, so Columbus Crew. Perfect, right? Yep. And I love it because now Crew has got this kind of like young people speak. Crew has become... They've accidentally landed on a really good name that they picked in the 90s.
Yeah, young people speak. I like that. Another one that we know from USL, the Harrisburg City Islanders.
Yeah.
It's because they play on City Island, which is a mile-long island between Harrisburg and Wormleysburg. I know you know that thriving metropolis.
Wormleysburg?
Yeah. So they play on City Island, so they're the City Islanders.
Yep, that's a good one. Charleston Battery, also in the USL, I think is named for Battery Park.
That would make sense.
Battery Park is in Charleston. It has literally a battery of cannons and armaments that was, I think, put there in 1812. This is what I read.
I think it was there for the War of 1812, yes.
Yeah, right. It was also there for the Civil War, and now it's become like a public park that still has cannons there. So it's this famous landmark. It is.
I walked around, yeah.
All right. So, and that's why they call it the Charleston Battery.
It's very pretty.
They have cannons on the logo, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the team crest.
Colorado Springs Switchbacks. Now, that was like a fan poll. I think they had 5 different options at the end. But a switchback is a 180-degree bend in a road or path, usually up a mountain. Colorado, from what I understand, fairly mountainous. So I'm guessing it relates to like climbing a mountain, staying in motion, all that good stuff. Climbing a mountain, staying in motion, handling adversity, and cutbacks.
How about this one? Tulsa Roughnecks.
Yep.
This is one I did not know before I researched it, but in hindsight makes a lot of sense. Tulsa is Oklahoma. It is apparently kind of like an oil town, or is or was. The logo is an oil rig. So I found out a roughneck is kind of slang for hard manual labor, and especially workers on an oil drilling rig.
You've never read Starship Troopers, have you?
No.
There you go. You would know what a roughneck was otherwise. Only because, well, they're not oil drillers, but it's like the unit of military in that futuristic world. They're called like Ratchet's Roughnecks, and then they become Rico's Roughnecks, I think.
I see. I don't think the Tulsa name is named after them.
I don't think so, but they're tough and, hard manual labor and all that good stuff. And then, like...
What if they were the Tulsa Starship Trooper Roughnecks?
That's perfect. I think so. I think that would be great. And then you do have, like, the Bethlehem Steel, who I think have that, connection to steelwork. And that's...
Bethlehem Steel, I've been told.
Excuse me, Bethlehem. Yeah. I apologize.
I just saved us a tweet.
I appreciate that. And that's actually where I was realizing in doing the research for this, that it is actually far more common with American sports teams than I realized.
Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, you've got the 49ers, obviously, you've got the Green Bay Packers, even like the Washington-based teams, the Washington Capitals, the Nationals, the Senators before then, Philadelphia 76ers, New York Knickerbockers. So you have kind of Yankees as well. So you've got lots of different kind of tie-ins to cities and like that harken back to bygone eras.
So speaking of bygone eras, there are a couple of interesting MLS team names that we found. I want to start with Kansas City Wizards. It basically is a reference to the Wizard of Oz being set in Kansas City, right?
Somehow that never occurred to me until you said that today, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's obviously what... And I think it's because they went by the Wiz, like a Kansas City Wiz.
They did. I think they literally changed the name later on.
Yeah. And so I think with that, I was like, oh, they love the Wiz. Like, it did not occur to me. Even then, it still should have occurred to me, but it did not.
And actually, I didn't research that, so this is me assuming that Kansas City Wizards is related to the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I think so.
It was kind of a rainbowy logo, if I remember.
Oh, yeah,
well, so
it certainly was. Yeah, it has to be. You also have the Dallas Burn, which, according to what I've read, the team was given its name for burning in the Texas oil fields and the state's hot weather.
I'm going to go more with the former than the latter.
I would say so. I would also say that it feels a little bit like somebody really liked the idea of calling the team the Dallas Burn and then just kind of tried to like reverse engineer how that worked out. It's like, oh, it's hot? Okay, we'll say it's hot unless we can find something else. Isn't there the flame with oil. We'll do that one. Like, so it just seems a little bit convenient.
The burn is like when you burn off this. Once you like tap the oil, that you burn off the first part. That's what I kind of remember from There Will Be Blood.
I should know this because I've been to multiple different facilities and written about it. I feel like you have to burn off some of the gas in order to produce natural gas. I forget how it works, but yeah, that's why you always have like the consistent, almost eternal flame at any sort of refinery.
It's a Bangles song play.
Yeah, that's what you go with Eternal Flame? All right. And then the other one, in terms of former franchises, would be Tampa Bay Mutiny, which, from what I read, was to keep them in touch with the fellow Tampa franchise, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the NFL.
For a pirate theme.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Interesting.
So the other part of John's question was, can you come up with better nicknames for teams that don't have regional tie-ins? And here's what John says. He also says, according to Wikipedia, NYCFC has the nickname the Pigeons, which makes sense. DC United carry the nickname the Black and Red, which is not as exciting. Can you guys fix that nickname for DC United and maybe some other clubs to better tie them to their region? For example, do people in Richmond, Virginia just kick things all the time? A reference to our team being called the Richmond Kickers.
Yeah, so I actually really love DC United. I love that name. I think it's a cool name. I think it was like one of the original, because it is much more common now to have FC and SC in the name and kind of just make it kind of that standard one. And DC were one of the first ones to do that.
All right.
So I like DC United.
Do you have an alternative, though?
I mean, I think it's cool to go back to like political history and the references there. So you're never going to be able to get the name because I'm sure it's copyrighted 8 million times over. But I do love like the Washington Senators. I think that's a cool one. Or the Diplomats.
The Dips. I remember that as an NWSL team, right?
Yep.
So I've gone with the idea that you should like base the name of the team on what most people in the region
do. The Washington
do.
Filibusters? Seems more apt.
Well, what most people work in, right? So I've gone with the DC Federal Contractors.
The DC, we don't want to have to pay your insurances. Yeah, I like that.
And I've also gone with the idea that city residents, because they're obviously obsessed, no taxation without representation. They don't like not having seats in Congress for DC residents. I want to give DC residents the right to vote. I want DC residents to pick the starting 11 of the DC Federal Contractors.
Oh, that should go well.
Every weekend.
That should go horrifically. Vote. Yeah. But I have got some other ones for you. I'm assuming the Colorado Rapids are named after the Colorado River and the rapids that are produced therein. But I'm going with the Colorado 420s. I think that one works pretty well.
That's nice.
I've got the Orlando Mice. That seems fitting. Although you could go with the Orlando Transfats or the Orlando Kings, because the highest concentration of Burger King, Taco Bell, and KFC in Orlando. Same thing, you could go the Louisville Queens, most Dairy Queens of anywhere in the country.
Interesting.
As well as McDonald's, Papa John's. And here's one for you, the Richmond Chicks or the Richmond Family.
What? Okay, so this is maybe the core of this question. If we were to rename the Richmond Kickers, which I feel like we don't want to do because we have lived with the Richmond Kickers for a long time, right? They're a team from the 90s, that name is established. Why would you go to Richmond Chicks?
Because you have the most Chick-fil-A's per capita of any place in the country, and then the Richmond Family because the most Olive Gardens. And when you're here, your family.
Oh, well, I like going with something more.
I'm not really suggesting those names. No, I do have a bunch of Richmond names if you want to get to those.
Yeah.
Can I run through some of my other ones first? Because I'm very proud of some of them. Okay. I enjoy the Las Vegas Syndicate. I think that's a good one. That might actually be in like basketball or something.
That's a good one.
You've got the Mafia references, but if you don't want to go that route, you could go the Las Vegas Newtons, since Wayne Newton has been there for I think like 20 years in residency at the MGM Grand, I think.
Okay.
You could go the Albuquerque Aliens. That seems logical, given Roswell. Or the Albuquerque Blues. Can you guess why?
Blues Brothers?
No. What TV show is set in Albuquerque?
Blue Meth?
Yep. Which is why I also had Crystal Blue FC. Yes, but in terms of Richmond, I had the Richmond Smokers. The Richmond Class Action FC, because you've got the tobacco industry based here. But the weird one, and this is the one I like the most, would be either the Richmond Krugers or the Promotion Beats Relegation in Richmond or Partisan Ballers of Richmond.
What on earth are you talking about?
All right, because Partisan Ballers of Richmond, acronym would be?
PB?
There you go. And Promotion Beats Relegation in Richmond would be PBR in Richmond.
I see.
Because you have vast amounts of PBR consumed in Richmond, but also historically, do you know what Richmond is?
No.
The first place where canned beer was commercially available.
That's true. Yeah, Hardy would have a cream ale that's dedicated to that.
And like the Richmond Ale Smiths, I don't think would work so well. The Richmond cans definitely didn't work, so I want to like tie it into the beer drinking community.
So I wanted to go with some Richmond history that I was proud of, right? And there's some that Richmond is not proud of, quite rightly, in terms of like old industries.
Yep.
One of the things I really like about Richmond is I think it was the first city in the United States that had streetcars and trolleys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the Richmond streetcars or the Richmond trolleys.
I like the trolleys better, I think, than the streetcars. That sounds rougher somehow.
Yeah. All right. So Richmond trolleys is my suggestion.
Oh, and the reason why I said the Richmond Krugers is because it was by Gottfried Kruger Brewing Company in 1935. They're the ones who made the canned beer.
I feel like a lot of your references need more. They need to come with an explainer.
Yeah,
you know
I'm okay with that, but that's what makes them cool and esoteric.
So I've got some more suggestions for just things that, like, the thing that the town is most famous for. Okay, so...
so do I, my friend.
The LA Galaxy auditions.
Okay.
We went similar for out-of-work actors.
We went for similar ones because some names are based on what the city is most famous for producing. So I've got the LA unfinished screenplays.
I've also got this one I genuinely like. So remember there was a disagreement about the Minnesota team being called Minnesota United? That's what the NASL team was called. I think for genuine reasons, as in some teams were united and merged.
Yep.
MLS didn't want another team called United. There was a whole panic about what it was going to be. How about the Minnesota Millers?
Okay.
So I looked at Minnesota's industrial history. First thing they did was sawmilling from trees around, and then later on flour milling. So the Minnesota Millers, and you get the alliteration.
I've got a Minnesota one for you. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's the Minnesota Lakers, since the LA Lakers were previously the Minneapolis Lakers.
Is that right?
So, you've got the land of 1,000 lakes. I forget what it is. We've had this conversation on the show before, and someone had to correct me then, too. But yeah, so you go back to the kind of the age-old name.
So going back to Kansas City, obviously since the Wiz, they've gone to Sporting KC. If you wanted to go with a more industrial thing, I would have called them the Kansas City Fur Trappers.
I think that could work for most of the Midwest and Canada.
But apparently there's a famous thing of like Lois and Clark going through there.
Lois and Clark, the newest adventures of Superman. Is that where it was filmed?
I meant to say Lewis and Clark.
Is Dean Cain famous there too?
Apparently they sort of did some trading there, like pretty much at the start of where Kansas City became Kansas City.
I'm laughing because I feel like the way his career has gone, somewhere on this planet, Dean Cain was just like, wait, someone was talking about me. I've got the Delaware Shelters, since that's where most people keep their tax shelters. I thought that was pretty fitting.
There's no Delaware team, right?
There will be eventually. And if a Baltimore team ever emerges, maybe if DC United sets their USL team there, we've talked about this on the show before, the Baltimore Hamsterdam.
Yes, we have. My final suggestion, the New England Puritans.
Interesting. Because I went with a regional one based on New England. If they get to claim a whole region, I think the South should have that too. I think Atlanta, if they get tired of being Atlanta United, they rebrand to just Southern Cooking FC. I like it.
I'm glad someone does.
How could you not? It's so good. It's not that good.
All right, if anyone else has any suggestions for what MLS teams or USL teams or NASL teams should rebrand as, you have more, don't you?
Tampa Bay Retirees, the Indiana Nopes, and the Carolina Camo.
I'd go with Tampa Bay Brimleys.
That's perfect.
Because Tampa Bay actually played in St. Petersburg and Cocoon was set in St. Petersburg.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, you.
See, that one is obvious immediately and it also has many layers to it.
Is it obvious immediately?
I mean, yeah.
All right, I'll give it to you.
When Wilfred Brimley's face is on the crest.
That's true. That is beautiful. It's just a big mustache.
She's just staring at you. All right, Taylor, shall we close today's show with an update to the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network?
I think you can pluralize that one, my friend, because we've got a number of updates and still more to come later on in the week. All right. But for now, we're going to get to them here. We've got one from Jonathan Failer, scouting Tommy Redding, the 20-year-old American defender for Orlando City. Redding has been named to the 24-man roster for the U20 training camp, which will run from January 31st through February 10th. Afterwards, U20 coach Tab Ramos will name a final 20-man roster for the CONCACAF U20 Championship in Costa Rica.
That was a lot of 20s in there.
Got to get them all in, baby.
Up next, DJ Ringus is scouting Levi Garcia, the 19-year-old Trinidadian left winger for RZ. DJ says, so based on the way Levi has yo-yoed, Taylor's term, between the young RZ and the senior team, it seems like he's too good for the youngsters and not quite good enough for the seniors. That said, he is getting playing time for RZ, which is bad for his national team. Trinidad and Tobago had hoped he would be eligible to compete at the aforementioned U20 tournament, but now he might not be released from club duty. Levi adds that his personal bias has him hoping RZ let him go to Costa Rica. Got to say, in this instance, DJ, Disagree. Be happy if the US didn't have to face him at some point.
Mm-hmm. Going back to John Adams, scouting, as we said, Shayon Harrison, the 19-year-old forward for Yeovil Town on loan from Tottenham.
Come on, Glovers.
Shayon has played twice since moving to Yeovil. He got 15 minutes in a 2-2 draw with Blackpool, and he played the entire second half in a 3-0 loss to Doncaster. So maybe not the best of starts for Shayon, but probably better than playing with Tottenham's Premier League 2 team, so at least there's that.
Up next, Jeff Markman, the other side of North London, is scouting Jeff René Adelaide, the 19-year-old French midfielder for Arsenal. Jeff says the Jeff made his 5th appearance for the Arsenal first team this season, starting in a double-barrelled midfield ahead of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and Ainsley Maitland-Niles. He put in his most complete performance to date in the Gunners' 5-0 FA Cup victory at St Mary's, their first win there since 2003. He exhibited poise and skill, finished with a 90% pass completion rate, and drew praise from both the Ox and Arsene Wenger. Most importantly, since Arsenal advanced, he probably hasn't seen the last of his first team minutes this season.
Up next, Ryan Marzak scouting Pione Sisto, the 21-year-old Danish winger for Celta Vigo. Unfortunately, Sisto did not appear in the second leg of the Copa del Rey against Real Madrid, but Celta Vigo did not need him as they knocked off the Giants and moved on to the semifinals.
That's disappointing though, right? Because you would think if he was important, they would keep him in that team.
Unless they're prioritizing winning in La Liga, because he did play there. More on that in a second.
Okay.
Celta Vigo got a lucky draw against Alaves and avoided both Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, which means those two teams are playing each other. So good work for Celta Vigo. Sisto did get the full 90 in Celta's 2-0 win over Leganes, during which he got fouled 7 times. So I guess attack would be the idea there.
Yeah, that seems too many times to get fouled.
It sure does.
Up next, James Jones is scouting Andrew Carlton, the 16-year-old attacker for Atlanta United. Andrew has been training with Atlanta United in Bradenton, Florida, and the marketing team even let him have Snapchat glasses for one day
No
of
idea
training.
what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
I don't know if it means like you can transmit stuff via glasses, or if it means that, I don't know, he Snapchatted stuff during training.
That's interesting. Would someone please let us know what Snapchat glasses are? I guess we could look at Andrew Cotton's
We are super cool.
Andrew also already has a song with the Terminus Legion. That's the Atlanta supporters group, right? Still no word on whether he'll be loaned to Charleston to get playing time, but it's telling that the franchise is involving him in these types of things.
There we are. Julie Nishimura Jensen emails in. She's scouting Alan Halilovic, the 20-year-old Croatian attacking midfielder for Las Palmas.
Oh, he was featured on yesterday's transfer deadline show.
He sure was. So as we told you then, Halilovic was sent on loan to Las Palmas from Hamburg for the remainder of the season. Julie reports that Halilovic looks distinctly unimpressed in the photos of him holding a Las Palmas scarf in what appears to be an airport, but he did say that he wanted to return to Spain, so perhaps he will finally see the field again in a country where he, I guess, wants to be playing.
Okay, next, Scott Gleich. Scott Gleich, featured earlier, is scouting George Acosta, 17-year-old American midfielder. Scott says Acosta scored the equaliser for the US Under-17s in a 1-1 draw with the Soccer Institute at Montverde Academy in what, as best as Scott can tell, was a random friendly. So John Hackworth said that this US Under-17 team plays a lot of games. I think they played DC United recently, the full senior team.
Interesting.
And they got beat. In addition, Acosta has been named again to the US Soccer Residency Programme for the spring semester.
And finally, Jonathan Holmgren, scouting Alex Iwobi, 20-year-old Nigerian winger/striker for Arsenal. Iwobi scored for Arsenal in their midweek loss at Watford. In the 58th minute, Iwobi jumped to meet an Alexis Sanchez cross and tapped the ball into the far bottom corner with his right foot. Quite an impressive display of skill, says Jonathan. Taylor, that would be me, is inclined to think it might have been unintentional.
I haven't seen it, so I can't say.
So it's basically the ball comes back across the box, and then he puts it back across into the side netting. Yeah. But it's that kind of weird like jump and then like half punch kick. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like he's trying to do that. It seems like he's just trying to get a foot on it, and he kind of hits it awkwardly. But I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not seeing it through Arsenal-tinted glasses. Who knows?
All right, thank you to everybody who sent scouting reports in. If you would like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, you can do so at totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. If you would like a more impressive scarf than the one that Halilovic was holding up, go to totalsoccershow.com/shop. You will see the TSS scarf as well as some TSS t-shirts.
I think that's the problem, is that it wasn't a roughneck scarf.
That's what it was.
Otherwise, it would have been fine.
So thank you to everybody who has subscribed recently. If you've sent me an itchy feet email in the last 10 days, we'll be getting your scouts to you very, very soon. All right, Taylor, we should get out of here so that we can come back tomorrow and watch Jamaica. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy. See you in about 24 hours.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again after the US-Jamaica game.